average and ordinary has way more competition than excellent. I've entitled this video Escaping the Rat Race because so many people feel trapped in a cycle that feels extremely unproductive. And I'm going to share with you some principles that I've discovered that help me escape the rat race. And this is a continuation of a video that you saw the first part of last week, if you saw it, like the video we released last week. Because right now, while you're watching this, I am on vacation. Okay. And so, but I've given this video a different title, Escape the Rat Race. And I'm going to give you the last 4 mindsets that have made me millions of dollars. We talked about mindsets that make millions on the video last week. Well, these are the final 4 of those mindsets that make millions. So the first one was from last week was be, do, have. And go watch the video if you don't know what I mean by that. The second one was the 4 levels of value. And the third one was it's easier to make a lot of money in a short period of time than it is to make a little money over a long period of time. The next one is nothing is expensive, right? Nothing is expensive. And I was listening to a Jim Rohn audio series a long time ago, and he said to his mentor, Mr. Earl Shove, he said, Mr. Shove, he said, I can't buy that because it's too expensive. He said his mentor said to him, it's not too expensive, Mr. Rohn, you can't afford it. And the difference is, if it's too expensive, the problem is it. And you can't fix it. But if you can't afford it, the problem is you, and you can fix you. You're the only person who can fix you. And obviously, when I talk about fixing you, I'm talking about your habits, right? I'm not talking about, you get it. So nothing's expensive. Everything just costs what it costs. In fact, there are things you buy right now that there was a time in your life when you felt like they were expensive. They were too expensive. So when I had a poverty mindset, I used to my whole life was figuring out, how can I get it for less? 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 And I remember my brother Rob, he went off to the Marine Corps. And we grew up really, really poor. Like there was 9 of us in our house, unless my parents brought some of our cousins to live with us for the summer. And then there might have been 13 or 14 of us, right? And we never lived in mansions or anything. And my parents worked hard, but you know, it was a struggle to feed 7 sons, and then sometimes their cousins. And so I learned how to take something that was not enough and make it do. My dad called that Mr. Make Do. I'm going to introduce you to Mr. Make Do. You just find what you need and you make it do, right? You find what you can find and make it do. And so my whole mentality growing up was, okay, we would buy cheap cars and then we'd spend hours and hours working on them, changing the transmission, changing the engine, fixing it. And some of you know exactly what I'm talking about. You've lived that life, right? And it wasn't a bad experience. It was just my experience. A lot of times we think of things in the past that were difficult and painful. And it wasn't even painful, but we think of things that are difficult and painful as being bad. They weren't bad. They were part of your preparation for your assignment. Anyway, so I would buy raggedy cars. In fact, my very first business I didn't even realize it was a business, was when I came home for the summer from after my first year in college, and I bought a car for $50 from the Paxton Herald in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, and I drove it around all summer, and then I sold it for $300 before I went back to college, right? And I made $250 profit on that car. Well, the business that I started buying old raggedy cars, fixing them up and selling them, right? And so if I was going to buy a house, I wanted to get the cheapest rent I could get. And if that meant I had to spend months working on the house, then I would spend months renovating the house for the person who owned the house so I could live in the house and only pay $150 a month for rent, or $250 a month for rent, or $300 for rent, right? So I would get the house for as little as I could and do as much work as I had to make that work, right? I remember the very first house that I bought was a 5-bedroom brick row house in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, 636 Emerald Street. And I bought it at the tax sale because there's a sale in every county. They have a tax sale. They have a judicial sale and a municipal sale. Municipal sale. I think they're what it's called. Well, the judicial, when you buy a house on the tax sale, for the judicial sale, you don't have to pay off the old taxes. You just buy the house and you own it free and clear. And so, but you go to an auction and there are other people bidding on this house. And so I had like 7 houses that I was going to bid on, right? And I didn't have a ton of money. I had a job, so I had a few $1,000s. And so I go to this house, and I had a couple houses, and some of the houses I looked at, I wasn't really crazy about, but I was willing to bid on them. And then people were like running these things up into the thousands of dollars. I'm like, I'm not going to get a house today, right? And so then 636 Emerald Street, whatever the lot number was, blah, 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 it came up and said, can I get a bid for $200? Can I get a bid for $200? Because they started all the bids at $200. Can I get a bid for $200? Nobody said anything. And I'm like, I know how to negotiate. I'm not going to be in a hurry, because then people are going to start like, can I get a bid for $200? I waited until he said it about 4 times, and I'm like, nah. I'm like, I'll give you a bid for $200. Like, I didn't want anybody to see my hand. I didn't go. I'm like, he said, I got 200. Can I get 250? I got 200. Can I get 250? I got 200. Can I get 250? Sold for $200. I bought that house for $200. That was my first house. I spent years renovating that house, which is okay, but that's what I knew how to do. That was the first house I ever bought. I spent $200 on that house because I thought buying a house the regular way, it was too expensive. But it wasn't too expensive. I just couldn't afford it. And the reason I couldn't afford it was because of the way that I was thinking about money. And the way that I was thinking about money as it relates to me. And the way that I thought, the things that I thought you had to do to make a lot of money, I wasn't good at any of them, I thought. Are y'all tracking? I thought I wasn't good at any of them. I was actually good at some of them. I just didn't know I was good, and I didn't know the things I was good at could make you money. It's so interesting how we all have scotomas. We all have blind spots. And I had some blind spots that were like, I don't know. And so that was the first house I bought. Well, the last house I just bought was $2.4 million. That's way more expensive than 200. So what happened? Did houses change? Did the housing market change? Yeah, houses got more expensive. So nothing is really expensive. Everything costs what it costs. Like, it amazes me that people obsess over the price of gas. And they know they have to put gas in their car anyway. What difference does it make? What difference does it make how much it costs? I'm not saying that because, and I know some of you are going to say, oh, that sounds like a snooty rich person. No. I'm just saying, when I was poor, I didn't obsess over the price of gas. Why? I knew I had to put it in my car anyway. I was either going to put it in my car or wear out my sneakers, right? Those are my choices. And so nothing is expensive. I just have to, if I want to be able to afford things that I desire to have, I have to learn how to think better, right? And if I learn how to think better, then I will be able to afford whatever I desire to afford. In fact, by the time you watch this video, you can go back to a video that I released as a live on July 14th, 2025, called Money Traps. And I break down how, for rich people, everything costs the same amount. It doesn't matter if I'm buying a bottle of water, a pair of shoes, a car, a house, or a private island, it all costs the same amount. So if you want to go back and watch that video, okay, from July 14th, 2025, as a live, go watch that. It's called Money Traps. Okay, cool. So nothing is expensive. So that was a mindset shift. So all I had to do was figure out then, I didn't have to figure out how to make it cost less. All I had to figure out all I had to do was figure out a way that I could afford it. And then it didn't matter. Does that make sense, everyone? Yes? Okay, so that one changed my life. Nothing's expensive. And so, by the way, the reason that's such an important thing is because if I say it costs too much, what I'm doing is I'm making a dead-end statement. But I can change that. I can change the dead-end statement. In fact, I don't have, what if I never said it costs too much again, or it's too expensive? Or what if I never even said I can't afford it again? Instead of making a dead-end statement, let's ask an open-door question. Would y'all like to know what an open-door question is? Yes? Instead of saying it's too expensive, or it costs too much, or I can't afford it, what if I said, how can I afford this? And if I apply the principles you talked about on the video from last week, be, do, have, Who do I have to be to afford this? What do I have to do to afford this? Oh, that's so helpful. Who do I have to become so I can afford this? What do I have to do so that I can afford this? Cool. Okay, so nothing's expensive. We got that one. Then this one shook me to my core. So I don't know what happens to you when you're reading a book and you come across a word and you don't know the definition. I don't know what happens to you. Well, I know you probably yawn. Most people yawn. I don't know if you know. Just pay attention to that next time you read a book and you come across a word that you don't know the definition. You'll go, like your brain's looking for some oxygen, right? Okay. Maybe you feel like you're drowning in confusion. I don't know, but I yawn. So, but what I do when I come across a word that I don't know what it means, I go look it up. Why? Because if I don't know what that word means, I can't understand anything that comes after it. Are y'all tracking? And so I go look up the word. And so I was watching a video on YouTube, and it was like a 5, maybe 7-minute video. Dr. Jordan B. Peterson starts talking about Price's Law. I'm like, Price's Law? I've never heard of that before. Price's Law, what is that? And this professor, Professor Derek Price, he discovered this principle, and he discovered that it's true across the board. And I'm going to show it to you on the board here in a minute, but I'm like, what is he talking about? What does this mean? And what does this mean to me? Like, what can I do with this information? Because, like, I mean, knowing a cool principle is nice, but having something to apply it to is better. Like, when I learn something new, my first question is, how can I use this? How can I use this? How can I use this, right? How can I use this? Like, how can I apply this to my life and make my life better, right? And so, here's I'm going to state Price's Law, and then I'm going to illustrate it on my trusty digital blackboard. So here's what Price's Law states. Price's Law states that 50% of the production of any domain is produced by the square root of that domain. Now, he said so many words that I had to think about in that sentence. I mean, so many. 50%, got that. Of the production, got that. Of any domain, okay, I think I got that. Is produced by the square root of that domain? What is that? What in the world are we talking about right now? Well, here's what we're talking about. In fact, I'm gonna go draw it for you because this is so cool. This is so cool. This is one of the coolest things I've ever learned. And for the purpose of high achievement, it's one of the coolest things I've ever learned. Okay, so he said it doesn't matter if it's a garden, if it's a sports team, if it's a sales team, if it's a business, if it's a country. It doesn't matter. If it's a family, it doesn't matter. 50% of the production of any domain is produced by the square root of that domain. Okay, so what that means is if you have 4 tomato plants, the square root of 4 is 2. So the 4 is 2 square. Square, when you square a number, you're multiplying that number times itself, right? So 2 times 2 is 4. 4 is 2 square. 3 times 3 is 9. 9 is 3 square. 4 times 4 is 16. 16 is 4 square. Y'all get it? Okay. So 50% of the production of any domain is produced by the square root of that domain, which tells, because 2 is the smallest whole number that you can square that it changes into a different number. Like 1 times 1 is only 1, right? Okay, so 2 times 2 is 4. So that means if you have 4 tomato plants or salespeople or businesses, it doesn't matter. If you have 4, in fact, I'm going to do this. I'm going to move these down. There, that makes it better. Okay, so it doesn't matter what arena they're in. If you have 4, half of the production is going to be produced by 2 of the whole domain, right? Like if you have 4 tomato plants, 2 of the tomato plants are going to produce half the tomatoes. If you have 4 salespeople, 2 of the salespeople are going to produce half of the sales and make half of the commissions. If you have 4 businesses, 2 of the businesses are going to produce the gross domestic product of whatever that area is. Okay, cool. That makes perfect sense because 2 is half of 4. But when the numbers get bigger, it stops making sense. And this is why this like messed with me for weeks. And maybe you are not as weird as I am. But that messed with me for weeks because if I change the square root to 3, then the square becomes 9. So if I have 9 tomato plants, 9 salespeople, 9 businesses, half of the production is going to be produced by 3. So if I've got, let's call it salespeople, you're all entrepreneurs or would be entrepreneurs. If you got 9 salespeople, 3 salespeople are going to make half of the commissions. The other 6 people are going to have to split the other half. What? If you have 3 businesses in a town, 9 businesses in a town, 3 of them are going to produce half of the production, half of the wealth, half of the money of that town. The other 6 businesses have to split the rest. Are y'all seeing why this is such a challenge? Okay, then what happens when we get to a bigger number? Let's go to 10. Let's go to 10 squared. 10 squared is 100. If you have 100 salespeople, 50% of the commission is made by 10 people. Now this is starting to get ridiculous. Isn't it? Basketball players, golfers, baseball players, football players, musicians. It's across the board. You'll see that it's true in a minute. Like, I'm getting chills thinking about this. Like, when I name those different categories and I think about how many people there are who are at the top of the top of the top of the top, it's always very small. And see, and so this is one of the ways we know that when the government says they're going to solve income inequality, they're lying. Because income is the result of productivity. And if you don't fix productivity inequality, you can't fix income inequality. Are y'all tracking? Okay. So what happens when it becomes 100? 100 times 100 is 10,000. This is crazy. What are we talking about here? We're talking about if you have a big business like Century 21, like Prudential, like MetLife, you have a big company that sells like across the country or across the world. If you got 10,000 salespeople, 100 salespeople make half of the commissions. Does that wreck your mind? And then here's what wrecks my mind too. So now we got 9,900. We got to apply Price's law to that too. And then it happens again. And then when whatever's left over, we apply it to that again. And it happens again. And it keeps happening. This is absolute bananas. Right? So, but how about this? There are 30 million businesses in the United States. 30 million businesses. You know what that means? That means that half of the gross domestic product of the United States of America is produced by the square root of 30 million, which I think is 5,477. 5,477 businesses produce half of the wealth in the whole country of the United States of America. And if you don't believe me, think about it. How many Facebooks, Googles, Apples, et cetera, are there that make trillions of dollars? There's a handful of companies that make trillions, another bigger handful that make billions, and then when you start getting down to hundreds of millions and tens of millions, the numbers just keep getting smaller. Now, why is this so significant? This has to mean something practically, doesn't it? It has to mean something practically. So then this is why it messed me up for at least weeks, maybe months. Like, what can I do with this information? Well, here's what it means. Here's what I discovered from this practically. You ready? Here's the brain breaker, the mind blower. Y'all ready? Mediocrity scales exponentially. Think about that. Being average, being mediocre is something that scales exponentially. Mediocrity scales exponentially, but excellence only scales incrementally. What? Is that crazy town? That's why you only have like one Michael Jordan. Or you got, like, when Michael Jordan was in the league, you got Michael Jordan, you got Larry Bird, you got Magic Johnson, you got Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. You have a handful of people out of hundreds of basketball players that are considered to be among the best in the world. Like, you have the all-star team, and then you have everybody else. I'm a golfer, so I think about golf. Like, there are only maybe 2 golfers that I know of, maybe 2, maybe 3 golfers that have ever won more than 10 majors. Out of the thousands of professional golfers that have ever been. Now, you know what that means? By the way, that probably sounds discouraging to some of you. Until you remember something else that Jim Rohn said. Are y'all ready? There's plenty of room at the top. It's the bottom that's crowded. Average and ordinary has way more competition than excellence. Let this change your game forever. So I start asking myself the question, okay, who do I have to become? What do I have to do to be one of the fantastic few and not be one of the mediocre many. And then I focus on those things. Because if this is true for people, it's also true for the activities of those people. So you take 10 things that you're doing, not 10 things. You take 100 things that you're doing, 100 things that you're doing right now, 10 of them are producing half of your results. What? If you take 9 things that you're doing right now, 6 of them are pretty much unnecessary. 6 of them, 3 of them are producing half of your results. We can focus on, like, if we will take inventory of our activities, we can figure out what's the square root that's producing half our results and focus most of our attention on that. And then we take the other 6 things that are left over, and then we square root that, and we figure out which things in that are causing most of the results in that part, and then we get rid of it. And you can optimize your life, you can optimize your business, because mediocrity scales exponentially, but excellence only scales incrementally. Okay, cool. Now, what's the next one? Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. If you want to, we're talking about mindsets that make millionaires. Calculate the cost of inaction every time you calculate the cost of action. See, most people know how much it costs if they do what? Whatever. But they don't know how much it costs if they don't. Wow. I think about, yeah, I got time to tell you this because I only have one more. I think about back in 2001 when I did this event in Waco, Texas, and I invited this guy named Jerry to come and speak at my event. And Jerry had been in the business of speaking for 15 years. I was just getting started. And I let Jerry speak at my event. He made an offer. Jerry made some sales. He made 10 times as much as I did. Okay, because that was my first event. I did $350 in sales. Jerry did $3,500 in sales. And there were only like 35 people there. I'm like, what just happened? And so Jerry says, hey, when you come to Dallas tomorrow, let's have lunch before you fly back home. I said, okay, cool. So we go to lunch. He spends 2 hours breaking down the speaking business to me. And then he said something that sounded crazy to me. He said, oh, don't worry about it, man. I got lunch. I said, oh, no, sir. No, sir. You ain't going to teach me how to make $1 million and buy my lunch? No, we ain't doing that. I got lunch. And I asked him about that a few years later. I said, Jerry, do you remember when you offered to buy my lunch that day? He said, yeah, that was a test. He said, if you would have let me buy your lunch that day, I wouldn't have had anything else to do with you. Because I would have realized you're a taker and not a giver. It's like, he was giving me a test and even tell me I was taking it. At least in school, they tell you you're taking tests. But in life, life doesn't tell you when you're taking a test. And that day changed my life because Jerry took an interest in me. Now, I paid him for some of his trainings and he taught me a whole bunch of stuff, but that changed my life because I took action and didn't let him buy my lunch. It changed my life. If there's something you can do to make your life better, and the only thing it's going to cost you is money, and you say no because of the price, you are saying no to opportunities in the future that are so bright, if you had access to them, you'd have to sleep with sunglasses on. But we calculate the cost of action, but we don't calculate the cost of inaction. By the way, when you're selling, if you're an entrepreneur and you sell, if you show people how much it costs if they say yes, but you don't show them how much it costs if they say no, you've done them a disservice. How many of y'all tracking? I could name dozens of people, clients of mine, who, if I named them, you would know them, who've done millions of dollars in revenue in a day. But in order for them to do millions of dollars in revenue in a day, I taught them how to do that. So they had to pay me tens of thousands of dollars. Some of them paid me hundreds of thousands of dollars. I'm not saying that because I have something for you to buy from me for hundreds of thousands of dollars or tens of thousands of dollars today. I mean, I have stuff, but that's not what I'm talking about. But if they would have said no to tens of thousands of dollars, I've got dozens of people that would have cost them $1 million day. So make sure you know the cost of inaction as much as you know the cost of action. Because sometimes action costs thousands, but inaction costs millions. Okay, here's the last thing I'm going to cover in this video, just for the sake of time, and because I think it'll change your life. Okay. This is a mindset that will change everything for you. Ask yourself this question. Every time you have an expense, every time you have something you pay for, ask yourself this question. How can I turn this expense into a profit center? How can I turn this expense into a profit center? I'm going to give you an example. So I just bought a house, and they told you I paid $2.4 million for this house. So $2.4 million is relatively significant to some, not as significant to others, right? But it's a fairly sizable sum of money for a place to live, right? Okay, so one of the things, we're having the house renovated right now, so we're putting a few $100,000 more into renovations, which is kind of crazy, but it is what it is. But the reason I'm telling you that is, like, how can I'm going to live in this house, right? I'm going to live in the house. I'm not going to rent it out for Airbnb, right? So I'm not going to do masterminds there. Like, I'm not going to have clients come to my house. I'm not doing that. So how can I turn my house into a profit center? Well, one of the bedrooms, I turned into a golf simulator room. And I bought a golf simulator. And it's the absolute best golf simulator on the market. And I'm going to start a golf YouTube channel. And on that golf YouTube channel, it'll be about simulated golf and real life golf. Me and simulated golf and real life golf. And that YouTube channel, I believe inside a year, maybe it might take 2, and that's fine, will completely pay for that mortgage payment on that house. So how can I turn every expense into a profit center? So now here's the thing. It's not necessarily about I've got to become this other person. Like, you may ask that question, how can I turn this expense into a profit center? You may ask that question and never find an answer. But if you don't ask the question, I can guarantee you ain't gonna find an answer. Does that make sense? And so, it's interesting that there are millions of women around the world who cook, but Rachel Ray turned it into millions of dollars. There are millions of people who are curious, but Oprah Winfrey turned it into billions of dollars. It's wild to me. It's wild to me that there are television shows about people going and bidding on people's abandoned storage units and their junk. Television shows. Figure out how you can take some of the things that you already do anyway and turn them into a profit center. I call that an anyway offer. And so, if you will apply the 4 principles from this week's video, the 3 principles from last week's video, and you will start adapting and adopting those mindsets can make you millions. And they may or may not, but at least you've given yourself a chance. It's kind of like when I'm playing golf and I'm rolling a putt. A putt that comes up short or a breaking putt that is below the hole has no chance of going in. I'm not saying you're going to make millions of dollars. Here's what I'm saying. It might be worth your while to give yourself a chance.